The House of Mystery presents Inside Writing, the radio show where authors discuss their writing process in all genres.
Oh, welcome back into the House of Mystery, and I'm Al Warren, sounding really butch still from my COVID cold, and Mr. Martino's having a cocktail there.
A cocktail?
Well,
no, it's tea, Al.
Yeah, please. I've never seen tea like that before. It's got this, and yeah, he's got tea with liquor in it. Please,
just because it's in a rocks glass,
yeah,
doesn't mean
it's iced tea.
It's alcohol.
It's iced tea. Please.
Yeah.
Please. We know your type. Orders pizza on Halloween. Like, how does that happen?
Well, it's a tradition now.
They're ordering pizza?
Yeah.
But how do they know? How do they get through all the kids and the candy and all that?
Well, luckily there are no kids.
Oh, they know better. They know. Oh, don't go to that strange man's house.
That's right.
He's always out there doing weird karate jumps and stuff on the lawn.
They stay far away.
Yeah, I bet they do. It's probably a report on you.
Yes.
Wow.
No, my records were expunged.
Oh.
I'm an innocent man.
Yeah, changed your name again. Well, speaking of expunged, we have an ex-con. No, we actually have a writer from Canada and a science fiction guy. Can you believe that?
No.
And so let's get him in here. Let's make his day awful. So, Mr. Scott Overton, thank you for being here.
Expunged? Man, you guys, I'm trying to keep a straight face while you're doing all this talking back and forth. By the way, I'm sipping just honey and lemon and hot water in a mug covered with Baby Yoda's face. So, hey, there you go.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
I don't either. It just happens to be the truth.
Yeah. Well, strange things go on up north.
Yeah. Looking forward to this because I know you guys have great conversations on this show.
Well, we try, I've got the whips out and we're ready. But, I always first of all, you see, I'm an old guy and I look at science fiction nowadays. And for me, I always think of old sci-fi, the Time Machine and all those old things that you'd see.
Which are so good. They're fantastic. As a matter of fact, my newest book, I actually put out a hardcover edition because I liked the cover of that so much. I liked two covers. One was good for a paperback, and people told me that was a good one. And then there was this other cover that looked like a vintage Isaac Asimov cover from the 70s. And I said, I got to have that too. I love that stuff.
Well, yeah. So it's got pictures. Great. I can read it.
On the outside, it has pictures.
Oh, not on the inside? Oh.
It's a cover. Well, yeah.
Well, you got to make one of those graphic things.
Graphic novels.
Well,
I'll bear that in mind, Alan.
Well, I'm good for advice. So now the problem I have, not a problem, but the things that I'm having an issue with is there's so many different types of science fiction nowadays. It used to be they were all put in one group. You'd watch it or you'd read it, and it was kind of, the mind was thinking about the fiction and the science, like it was moving around. Nowadays, there's so many divisions that I get confused by it. I was just talking about that because we had a techno thriller Enigma series, the guy on there, and it was like,
right, yeah, I heard that.
He was really upset about being called sci-fi or horror or any of those different names, and I find that confusing. I'm just not sure how that.
Well, I consider that techno thrillers pretty much enter into the science fiction realm. I mean, I think of Michael Crichton's work a lot of times as techno thrillers, and they're not, perhaps in some people's mind. To mine, they are. And people compare my work to his often enough that in that they've got a science fiction concept, something weird like, cloning dinosaurs, but a thriller kind of plot. So not your typical what people thought of as science fiction plots where people go into space and they whatever, strange societies develop or who knows. there are so many different kinds of it. If you look at the Amazon categories for science fiction, there are about 6 or 7 very well established subcategories, and you have to pick which one your book fits, or just lump it into general science fiction, which, you can do too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just confusing for me. And even fantasy, that word, right? I'm thinking, so people go, I'm a fantasy author, and I'm thinking Fantasy Island, but.
Yeah. I have people ask me if, I have any fantasy books or whatever. And I say, well, not anything high fantasy, but I've written fantasy short stories, meaning that they're out there, that they're a little weird. I would compare them to Ray Bradbury's short fiction in the sense that they are fantasy. They are offbeat. They're off the beaten path. Doesn't mean they have elves and dwarves and wizards and things like that. Not at all. So, yeah, you're right. Fantasy there, too, has such a broad spectrum.
Yeah, it's very unusual for me. But, well, so what got you on this road? And I always ask this in a sense of it takes a lot to write a book and to actually publish it. And whether you go through agent or whether you go through publisher, self-publishing, writing it on paper and leaving it in bathrooms. It's a lot of work to do this.
I haven't tried that one yet. I got to get to that one.
My bestsellers are in bathrooms everywhere, just so you know.
It's a labor of love. There's no question about it. And in whichever way you go, it is a very hard road. But I always wanted to be a writer. I was a writer as a little kid. As soon as I could put words to paper, I would write stories. And I grew up on science fiction. My father particularly loved science fiction, and we'd have these long and involved conversations about science fiction novels around the kitchen table after dinner, sipping our tea and whatever. And so I always wanted to do that. Life got in the way. A career as a radio personality like you guys got in the way, but I eventually got into writing, and that's what I do now. And science fiction was my first choice. People ask again, why science fiction? And really it's because that's where my ideas come. We don't control where our ideas come from. We can't. But I have no new things to add to the family saga or to historical fiction or to mystery stories or anything like that. I have no ideas along those lines. My ideas come in the form of, hey, this is a weird concept, or what if this were to go in that direction, and where would it lead, and those kinds of things. So I just really don't have any choice. That's what I write.
Well, do you feel the speed of innovation and technology makes it harder to stay, a step ahead of current technology when it comes to...
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh, well, my newest book, Augment Nation, is about brain augments. It is about direct brain-computer interfaces, as they call them. So they're computerized brain assists. You got the computer power, but you've also got the connection to the internet with a thought. And the thing is, brain-computer interfaces have been around. Well, they've been experimenting with animals since the 70s, with people since the 80s and 90s. They're around. You can buy different kinds to help. Primarily, the technology has been to help people with disabilities of one kind or another, whether neurological or brain damage or, debilitating, wasting diseases of the nervous system, whatever. And they let them control computer cursors to communicate, or robotic devices, or in some cases, some of their own, limbs which may not be responding. And so that technology is there. It's coming along. People know of Elon Musk's Neuralink company, but there are others that are even farther into human trials and stuff. And I really had to feel the pressure to get this out, because I set this book about 20 years from now at a time where I see these devices becoming consumer items, taking over from smartphones, because they can do all those things and so much more with the thought. And the technology, I think, will get there within 20, 25 years. So, yeah, the pressure to get it out before that happens is very strong.
How do you know when you're writing and you're putting together a book like the new one, Augment Nation, right here? How do you know when what you've written is good?
When someone tells you it's good. when you have a reader come up to you and say, my Lord, I couldn't put it down. I loved it. That's when you think it might be good. I can't say there is a place or a situation in which I would say, I know this is good. Now, I mean, that particular one, I had a very, very well-placed, well-experienced New York agent tell me it was a powerful novel. And I thought, that's good. And I had Robert J. Sawyer, whom you guys interviewed, I think, last spring.
Yeah.
Maybe March. And he is the dean of Canadian science fiction. And he gave me a very, very kind blurb about the book and meaning to take in my work in general. So I was very blessed with that. But is there a time and place and means by which you know that the book is good? No, I don't know if there is.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get information because I want to make a career out of this. So,
sure you would. Why would you not want to give up what you're doing now and live in poverty?
Hey, I want to be successful at this. So, so I got to, find out.
Everybody wants to live the glamorous writer's life, Alan.
Yeah, must be nice.
And you have. You know what it's like.
Yeah. Well, but how do you know when it's ready to go then?
Oh, well, now I do work, and if something is published through my own means, through my own publishing company, I work with a professional editor. And I also always ask people to read them. What we in the biz call beta readers. I know you've heard the term before. So there are people who volunteer to read the book and assess it as readers. We don't ask them to assess it as critics or as editors, but just as readers. And is there a bad, slump in the middle of the book? Are there characters that are not believable? Is there a plot resolution that just doesn't work? Anything like that, we ask them. And if you get a lot of answers that say, yeah, this part's crap, well, it's probably not ready. But if I find that the answers are very minimal or can be easily fixed, then I fix them. Then I send it to my editor, whom I've trusted for now 4 novels, I guess. And we go ahead. We go ahead with it.
You can always just have the beta readers killed.
I've never had to reach that point. I mean, I've certainly disagreed with some, wondering what their agendas were, but that's not very often. Not very often.
Well, I'm just telling you, just when in doubt.
I'll bear that in mind. I'm taking a note on that now. Here we go. Yes.
This is important.
And then after the show, we can talk about your contacts.
Oh, for sure. That's what Dave does. Do you think he works on the radio? He's drinking and he gets primed.
That's how he has the money to have the cocktail while we're doing
he does cocktails and he goes out for a drive.
A good sideline business. Good for you, Dave.
He knows what he's doing here. He's got to.
Absolutely. Right.
Can we extend it to reviewers who give authors bad reviews? Do you do them too? Maybe a group discount rate?
And sometimes he'll do 2 for 1.
Dirty deeds done dirt cheap, right?
Yeah.
Excellent.
That's
excellent.
What he does. Well, but I'm still trying to figure out when you write a book, what comes first? Is it your characters or is it the idea here? Because this is important.
Oh, it is important. And I have to kind of give an answer that sounds a little wishy-washy, but I think it's different for everyone. Now, my own view, I probably wiggled my way into the way I now work it, but it came to me as I was working on it that really everything is about character. And this came even when I was writing short stories, which sometimes are just not much more than vignettes, but everything's still about character in that if you have no character that the audience is identifying with, if they don't care about the main character, whether they live, they die, or hurt, anything, the story cannot really have the impact that you want to have it. You can throw them into any kind of conflict or any kind of life-threatening situation, whatever you want. If the reader doesn't care about them, then they won't care what happens either. And so I think it really does come down to that. You need to have a character, and probably more than one, that people care about and want to know what happens to them. So then they can become invested. We all read and we become invested in these great characters and feel they're maybe a little part of us or a part of us in them. and then we can follow that story. But of course, then you've got a concept, you've got maybe some other ideas, the strong themes. Those are all important. So I guess my answer is a little bit of everything. I do tend to start with a concept and a theme that I want to get across. And then, as other writers may have told you, I'll find a character who best illustrates what I want to get across in that theme. So I know that others, and I'm thinking Robert J. Sawyer again, he has often used Planet of the Apes, the movie, as an example, in that Charlton Heston's character, starts the movie blasting the human race. They're terrible. They're awful. We're so useless. We should be gone. And then he ends up having to defend the human race. So if your theme is to defend the human race or explore something along that line, pick a character who's trashing it in the first place and has to come to a realization that, hey, maybe things are not the way I saw them.
Well, do you find it a difficult balancing act to basically balance that the plausible science, technology with plot, characterization, theme, all of that?
I think you do have to take some artistic license every now and again. I really, really work to try to establish as much knowledge of the science as I possibly can when I'm going into some kind of concept. But I'm not a scientist. I know that I miss some things, perhaps. I have one novel called The Primus Labyrinth. It was my first science fiction novel, and it was inspired by the old movie Fantastic Voyage, which you probably remember, you guys would, being old guys like me.
What are you trying to say?
But yet with nanotechnology, present day or very near future technology. And so I know one of my beta readers who was a scientist said, well, what about Browning motion? There's the motion of the molecules. Wouldn't that affect how this submersible? Yeah, it probably would, but I just ignored it. Sometimes you have to reach a point where you ignore it and hope that it's not critical to readers.
Do you worry about crossing into the conspiratorial world because it's been so, I guess crazy is the best term I can come up with, even though that's not politically correct, but it's been really kind of powerful the last 5 years, let's just say. So do you worry about crossing into that sort of field?
I absolutely do. I wouldn't have normally with most of my books, but this one, Augment Nation, my newest, does certainly take it to that extent because, of course, when you have these brain-computer interfaces that directly connect to the internet, that connection goes the other way, too. And we know the different things that we suspect with marketing, and not just suspect, but no, I think everybody kind of figures the NSA can have every kind of surveillance going, and probably does, and marketers know what we talk about and pop up ads about what we were talking about with our friends, all these things, so when you get into that and take that, throw in some steroids, take it to the nth degree, obviously marketers, big companies, and governments will want that kind of access to our minds. There isn't really any question about it. So then you're getting into conspiracy theory territory. I don't believe that most of the things put forward by conspiracy theorists nowadays are with the technology. I think the technology isn't there yet. I think they're fantasy at the moment, but not always necessarily. So with the technology that I describe in this book, even when I've told people about it, they kind of go, oh, yeah, that's truth. That's truth. That's really happening. Well, no, not yet, but it could. And that's my point in the book is, before this technology gets to that point, let's be aware that it's a possibility and think about how we want to take this.
Well, that seems to be an issue for humans, thinking, that is. Because I don't know. There's sort of the last years it's been kind of crazy. So I just don't, there's a lot more emotion that goes into, general thinking and stuff like that. That's sort of why I asked about conspiracy, because there's so much emotion behind conspiracy that when you get into science fiction, it can kind of carry over in your characters, right?
And some of the stories can be really great when it comes to conspiracies. And, you know, even if you look at something like 1984, well, the idea that we could be headed in that direction then feeds into the conspiracy mindset. And many of the other cautionary tales that I kind of feel Augment Nation fits into, you know, Fahrenheit 451, any of those severe kind of things. Yeah, I mean, the idea our society could be going in those directions feeds into fear. And as I don't have to tell you, fear has been a real commodity these days, where the media feeds on it and governments feed on it. And they know that fear is one of those powerful things they can tap into. And so I'm not sure where it's all going to go, but it is one of those things, one of the most powerful of emotions. And when you can tap into that, well, for one thing, you can have a really great story, but you can also have some really terrible results in the real world.
Yeah. Why don't you start your own group and then have kind of all these followers and that? You know.
Is there a way to make money that way? Can you?
Well, I think so. You get them on board. You know, they're believe in everything you say and do, and they'll all buy your book. Yeah.
I hear you have a former president who makes a lot of money, and maybe I'll look into that. Apparently, he raises quite a bit.
Yeah, don't blame that on me. Okay, that's Dave's fault. Okay.
Oh, okay.
It's always my fault.
Yeah.
There you go, Dave.
Yeah, he's out drinking and not voting, and look what happens. But, well, yeah, it's kind of crazy. Well, do you have something in your mind? Well, of course not. But do you have something in your mind that you
Nothing
want?
whatsoever.
No, it's just like, it's just kind of rattling there.
Yeah.
No, but do you have something that you want people to get out of a book? Or is it pure entertainment for you?
Oh, no, it's not pure entertainment for me. It's always very much I say a theme rather than a message, because I don't want to hit people over the heads with it. Augment Nation is very primarily about the kind of privacy issues that we are dealing with now with smartphones and things. We give up so much of our privacy and private information and so much access to ourselves and our lives just for reward points or very much for convenience. We're really big on convenience. And if it means we can get convenience, oh yeah, they can listen in on anything and do anything they want with our information, and we won't read that fine print. And so it's very much about that as a kind of a cautionary thing, not slamming people, because I do that too. I have my smartphone with me all the time, but it's kind of be aware, folks, that there's always this side of it, and we should be cognizant of that with whatever we do and whatever we get ourselves into. So that book is very much about that. I have other ones. I mean, I mentioned The Primus Labyrinth. It's about traveling through the bloodstream, but modernized from Fantastic Voyage. There's a lot in that about the privacy and inviolability, if you like, of the body. The victim is a VIP very close to the American president, and the submersible is traveling through the bloodstream to try to save her life. But she has not been told what happened to her by presidential edict. He says there's no way she can know what's happening. So the pilot of this submersible has a very big problem with that. He's going places no man has gone before, and she's not aware. And even though they're trying to save her life, he has a big problem with that. I have another novel called Naida. It's about a man who ends up with a symbiotic alien being living in him, and they have to learn to live together, and it gives him some special abilities. There's some element of the superhero origin story there, but played very straight. Like, what in the world would you do if that happened? But it's very thematically about how much can a human being be changed and still be human. I mean, the main character feels human, no question about it, but ask some of the women that he'd like to have a relationship with, and may not be quite so much certainty there. So yes, long answer to your question. I believe that science fiction should explore our society of today and the important issues, and B, strong themes that affect everyone, that are just part of the human condition.
Yeah, your character, Damon, in this newest book here, how do you create a character? How does it that you develop this person? Is it totally out of the blue in your mind? Is it someone you've met on the road, maybe in a,
That's
ditch?
a tough one as far as that goes. I don't think I met him in the ditch or a bus stop or anything like that. Of course, we take pieces from everybody we know,
Right.
and a lot of pieces from ourselves, I'm sure. Although I wouldn't consider him to be very much like me. Again, that was a case of, here's the concept. You've got the promise and the peril of this brain-computer interface technology. And so what happens? Well, the society's happening. You can't just paint a big picture of the society doing this. You've got to take it down to the microcosm of one person's story. And I decided it would be good to have a person like Damon, who in his case has had a brain-computer interface implanted in his skull since he was 14 to correct a condition caused by some brain damage from a car accident. So by the time he's an adult, this is when these BCIs become more commercialized and consumer-oriented. He is very well placed to not only detect and understand the drawbacks, but fight against them. So he ends up being a kind of a reluctant, I don't want to say hero, he's not the heroic type, but at the same time, resistance leader, if you want. And that's how it came about. I thought, who would be best to epitomize this? Well, someone who's got one and knows the territory and knows the drawbacks and can help fight against it. But at the same time, he's got his own challenges, his own issues. He's not your stereotypical hero type to try to fight back against the institutions and governments of the world.
Well, do you have an inner monologue in your head? Can you hear Damon when you're writing dialogue, or when you're writing prose, or any of your other characters? How do you create dialogue?
There are ways you can do it. I heard one really good trick that I have kind of followed in ways and adapted in different ways from the UK writer David Mitchell, who wrote Cloud Atlas, among others. Brilliant writer. And I did a week-long course with him. And he helped me kind of outline one book, not this one, but he would write letters to himself as the author from the character. So the character is writing a letter to the author saying, hi, this is me, and why do you have me doing this situation? And you know that my background is such and such and such and such, made me weak in this area. I mean, you throw me into in with the lions or whatever. So he's got this going, and writing that letter, you can establish the voice of the character, the sound of how they would talk, the things they would talk about, the things they wouldn't want to talk about. And there are little tricks like that you can use to kind of try to establish that voice. It's especially important if you're going to do a first-person narration, which I have done, but mostly in short fiction and in novels that I haven't gotten around to having published yet. That's a whole tricky area as well. I usually write third person, but that, to answer your question, I think is what it is. You try to find a way to write it. It could be a conversation that they have with somebody else, that you're just writing a scenario. It may not have anything to do with the book, but you write out this conversation or a job interview or whatever. And by that, you can kind of find their voice. So that's a good trick.
Interesting.
Sounds nutty to me.
Well, that's as nutty as the writers who will tell you, Alan, yeah, I was going to have the plot go this way, but the characters changed their minds and it went that way instead.
Yeah.
And yet that can happen. Now, I'm one of the writers that don't fly by the seat of our pants. Writers talk about pantsers and plotters, people who just got an idea and they start and they write with it and go with it, and others who outline. And I'm on the more of the heavy outline side of things. But
Wow.
At the same time, once you actually start to write the story, if you've fleshed out those characters and you really do have backstories and all these different characteristics of them, yeah, they can get to a situation and you realize, wait, no, they wouldn't react the way that I have them reacting. They're going to react this way. I got to change something.
Right, right. But the characteristics of some of your characters, like all of the characters, especially your main ones, there's certain aspects to it that you've almost got to write them a little larger than life. Otherwise it doesn't play out real.
Yeah. Yes and no. I don't know. My very first novel was about the radio business. It's a novel called Dead Air, because every radio novel has to be.
You're talking about my.
I think there's a law that says if you write a novel about radio, you got to call it Dead Air, or work that in there somewhere. But especially if it's a kind of mystery or thriller plot, it just fits in there. So the character is not particularly likable to start with, and he's got a character arc seeking redemption, which is the age-old, most often quoted character arc. This flawed character who's seeking redemption. So, you go that way. I don't think he's larger than life, but of course, in many cases, fiction, things happen to them that you really don't expect to happen to real people. That's what makes it fiction, or at least the kind of fiction that I write. So, are they larger than life? I think they have to be to the point where they cope with some things that we might consider unthinkable. Having an alien being suddenly take over and live in your body, not take over necessarily, but live in your body, that's unthinkable. And some of the other characters.
Are you sure that wasn't bad gas?
Well, it communicates. So I've never had a case of gas that was quite like that. Let's not go there.
Well, I ate at this Mexican restaurant.
So they cope with unthinkable situations, or nearly unthinkable situations that we would never want to cope with. They're larger than life in that sense, I guess, but they also have to have enough common, ordinary humanity that we identify with them and put ourselves in their place. The best stories, anyway. I mean, I know there are people like Jack Reacher in fiction who, larger than life in every sense. The guy's huge. He always wins. He has never met a challenge that he couldn't defeat pretty handily. So, hey.
Yeah. People seem to go for that, but you know what I mean?
It is popular. I think it's not as useful for exploring what I was talking about in the way of issues that affect humanity. If you want to have an issue that affects everyday humans and maybe all of us, you kind of have to have something that we can identify with. Can we identify with Jack Reacher? No, we'd like to know about his adventures, but we can't really identify with him.
We like to know what he's got under it. Well, that's my. But yeah, I know what you're saying, because because when they're Jack Reacher, they make it look too easy.
They do, and so that really can't help you as an ordinary person deal with this issue or give you any insights into how to deal with that issue. It's just kind of like, well, yeah, I wish I could solve that problem. If your issue is poverty and you got a hero who's rich, how does that help you solve your, impoverished kind of life, or whatever the case may be? It doesn't do anything for you that way. It doesn't really give you any insight. So I think to explore issues of human nature, you have to have a more identifiable, smaller, not larger than life character, not too much anyway.
Well, I'm wondering too, you mentioned aliens and having an alien character. Is that mainly imagination for you, or is it, do you do a lot of research to create something like that?
Well, as far as aliens go, I don't know what research you can do except in fiction, and yet there have been so many aliens in fiction and so many non-humans that you wouldn't necessarily call aliens in fiction. And they're really interesting to explore. In my novel, Naida is the name that the human character gives to the alien character. And the alien is essentially an adolescent. It comes almost like an embryo into his body and grows from there. And as an adolescent, it's well-meaning, but it knows nothing about its own species. It knows nothing about the human species. So there's a lot of stuff that's interesting to explore. And really, that's imagination, but where else can you draw from? Well, you can draw on what you know of kids, raising kids, and how they explore the world and how they react to things they don't know about. So I think I drew from that quite a bit, and knowledge of adolescence and some of the ways that they go wrong, meaning the very best, they still make mistakes. So, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I guess in a sense, when you draw from other fiction, it's almost like when you take, let's say, vampires or monsters, stuff like that. There's a lot of kind of, I guess trope would be the word, but there's certain things that come along with these creatures, just like aliens. So there's certain things you expect out of an alien. Do you draw your alien from that, what's already been done, or is this sort of, do you try to be different than that?
Well, if you can do something fresh, that's all great. That's wonderful. But there have been a lot of symbiotic alien beings living inside humans in, especially TV shows. I'm thinking like Stargate and Star Trek, Deep Space Nine and stuff. There have been a lot of those kinds of characters. I think that I chose the right path when I made my alien an embryo, a child sort of to begin with, so that it is influenced a bit by an artificial intelligence that was kind of guarding it, shepherding it. But beyond that, it really doesn't know what it's supposed to act like, doesn't know what its human expects, and all of that. So I could be, I think, kind of fresh with that. I didn't have to draw on a lot of other ideas of that. Many of the symbiotic relationships will have an alien that's, either lived through multiple lives with other characters, as in Star Trek, or at least is long-lived, has lots of experience and whatnot. I didn't go in that direction, and I was happy that I didn't.
So what's your inspiration? And I don't mean that like, what's your favorite writer and blah, 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 and that stuff. Do you have an inspiration outside of writing that you draw from?
Wow. I'm not sure that I can answer that in the way that you're intending the question. I am inspired by nature. I love the natural world and live actually on an island, kind of it's not right in the middle of nowhere, but it's a long way from many people. And I just love the natural world that way and feel very strongly about it. And in a work in progress that I'm working on, I have a space character. He works out in space, but he has this syndrome whereby he can't stand to be away from Earth. And he has to treat it with virtual reality and various things like that. Because I wouldn't, much as I love Star Trek and many other things, I couldn't stand to be away from this planet and living in a can, however big and luxurious or anything like that, for months and months and months, if not years on end. I would go crazy. And so that nature inspires me, but yet it doesn't necessarily figure into a lot of my fiction. There are some of my books, and particularly ones that I haven't yet published, that do get into the natural world in that sense. Several of them I can think of that I've written quite a number that I haven't gotten to publishing yet. But yeah, I do find that as an inspiration.
Well, how do you know you're not crazy now and that living in a can for months would make you sane?
Well, there's always that question. And consciousness and the nature of consciousness was a very, very big thing in a lot of my fiction that I was writing. In a lot of short fiction, it figures quite strongly into the books, the novels that I have published so far, because you got Augment Nation, where the consciousness is connected to the internet. At what point are outside influences, outside thoughts coming into your head, and how do you begin to know the difference after some point? How do you know what was your idea and what was someone else's? There's that element of consciousness. There's the element in Naida with the alien being that's a consciousness. It's a sentient being in itself, and yet now you've got two consciousnesses in the same body. I also have a novel just previous to Augment Nation called The Dispossession of Dylan Knox, whereby Dylan Knox is no longer in the body of Dylan Knox, but there are 3 other personalities in that body. And so I explore the consciousness aspect of that and the relationship aspect of that too. And the Primus Labyrinth, again, we're traveling through the bloodstream, controlling a nanotechnology virus-sized submersible. The pilot, he's sort of PTSD in the sense he's survived a very traumatic accident in a submersible, but he's connecting by virtual reality, and it's this mental link that becomes so strong, he begins to not be sure which is the reality, the inner world of the bloodstream or the outer world of what we think of our own bodies and everything he goes through that way. So consciousness is a very strong theme and concept of mine too that I explore.
Well, you mentioned short fiction. Do you have a preference? Do you feel like you're a natural novelist writing short fiction, or a natural short fiction writer writing novels?
To be honest, I think I spent more time writing short fiction in a way to establish credibility, street cred, you know? You establish your credentials that way in short fiction. But I did enjoy it. I do prefer to write novels, but I certainly did enjoy writing short fiction in many different ways, and I've put a collection together. I've put out some that are in the form of just short ebook anthologies of about 3 stories each, and then gathered about 15 of them together into a book that's available by print on demand. I just call that Beyond, but it goes all over the place. Space, time travel, some that you would call fantasy, but in the sense of one story where it's about this little girl who goes around an old burnt out town site eating blueberries. And by virtue of eating the blueberry, she learns things about the past and about language, not her native language, and things like that she should never have picked up. That's a fantasy story, but it was fun to explore. So whereas a novel will take you so much time to have to write, and you can't explore every concept in novel form, short fiction is the answer there.
So supernatural and spirituality and ghosts and all that stuff, occult. Do you ever get into that area or venture that at all in any of your books?
I don't know that I would consider anything that would be occult per se. I'm not afraid of having a science fiction story that really doesn't have a lot of science, or that I don't get into the science for. My first ever published short story was about a guy who could walk through walls. And the way he did it was because it got to the parallel universe theory, where he kind of tuned his body, his molecules mentally like a radio dial, and he could just tune them slightly, and he would be venturing into a very near parallel universe where that wall didn't exist. But hopefully a floor existed, or he'd be in trouble. That kind of thing is interesting too. But I don't know that I would call it a cult. I can enjoy reading those kinds of stories. The urban fantasy type things where they've got werewolves and vampires and things. I just don't write them.
Yeah. It's just sometimes I know when people are dealing with, what is consciousness, and they get into that, and quite often the spirituality or supernatural part of it, of the world, can get into it, contacting another being that used to live or something, that kind of thing. So
yes, I get you.
So I always kind of see where your head's at there, if you're completely insane or if you're just.
I tend to believe in, first off, the ongoing existence of the consciousness, hopefully after death. What form that takes, I tend to kind of believe in, group consciousnesses, as if the consciousness is joined together in the universe and continue on in some unknown form. So that's a little bit about what you're talking about. I don't like to think about our death comes and that consciousness that sprang from nowhere and is just a wonderful miracle is gone suddenly. Over, end of story. I find I can't bring myself to believe that. So I have to think of some other way that the consciousness can go on. I haven't really explored the idea of past consciousnesses coming into the future or something like that, or those who are dead. My story, The Dispossession of Dylan Knox, the dispossession part is a riff on possession, as in demonic possession. But these beings that have kind of taken the body over are not from the past. They're from somewhere else that I don't necessarily want to give away yet.
Yeah, right. Well, thank God. That means Brittany will live forever.
In some form, we never have to say that personality is lost.
Yeah.
That's a great comfort to you, I'm sure.
Yeah. Thank God. You know, I can relax now. I'll get some sleep tonight. Wow.
You're welcome.
You're amazing. Now, one book, if someone's never heard of you, which is really hard to believe, right? But if there is that one soul out there, they're probably somewhere, Australia or somewhere. And so now, what if you were to say, read one book that would capture your writing? Which one book would you tell them to read?
That is a really tough question, Al. Thank you very much for that. Put me on the spot. It's like people will ask me that when I'm selling my books in person. Which one should I start with? Which is your favorite?
Yeah,
well, I don't have a favorite kid either. I love them all. I would say right now, read Augment Nation. It is, I think, an important book. It's not just an entertaining book. It's not just a book that will make you think. I think it's a very important book for our times. And so that's probably the one that I would recommend right now. And it's not just a matter of, I always like my latest book best, because I've written other books since then. And I like them all for various reasons, or I think I do. Sometimes I wonder. But that's, I would certainly recommend that. Now, a friend of mine compared the Primus Labyrinth to Michael Crichton and said, that's so much like that. If people are fans of Michael Crichton, read that book. Naida, I think, is a very, very endearing character, the alien symbiote. And so, that's interesting. The Dispossession of Dylan Knox, if they're tending to like romance, that has the strongest romance element of any of my books. But although I love to have a love story, I always have a good love story in them. So is that a long answer? I'm sort of waffling there, but Augment Nation would be number one pick for now.
Okay. Well, Michael Crichton, I think I've heard of him. Does he write?
He wrote some pretty good stuff. Okay. Yeah, he probably doesn't have that big a following, but I think he had talent. I think he had a lot of talent.
I can't find him on Amazon, but I'll try and figure out who this guy is. But the reason too I asked was nothing wrong with picking your newest published book, because in a sense, don't you find that each time you write a book, you get a little better?
I like to hope so. Yes, I like to hope so. I certainly try to experiment with each new book to try to do something different that I haven't done before, and stretch, whether it's muscles or whatever you want to call it, your writing muscles, your abilities, your skills. Try to stretch them and do something a little bit different for me to make it more interesting. Whether they're better, again, that gets back to the question of, are they good? How do I know when they're good? I'm not sure if I know that this is a better book than other books. Everybody will have their favorite, but I always do try to do something different and fresh and stretch myself.
Well, I just think we learn something each time we go through the process and you get something published. Because if you were to look back at your very first book or first written story, you'd probably go, and want to make changes just because we grow. I would think, but maybe not. Maybe. Oh no, that's very, very true. And I'm sure it's a temptation for every writer to want to go back and fix things that they kind of are not as impressed with or think they could do better now. But you can't, obviously. Once it's published, it's out there and that's it. So you go and write another one that you think will be as good or better and different, and stretch yourself, and we'll find a whole new audience, a whole new following. Yeah. I always go to a different, like to a mall bathroom and drop my books off, and you grow with a whole new audience.
One of the cool things that ideas that I came across the other day was putting the books, and I think it was Mark Leslie Lefebvre who you've also interviewed. He's very good at marketing. He suggested putting books in those little mini libraries that they have in neighborhoods and stuff. The free libraries that people have out at the street, just kind of squirrel a book in there, and
Yeah, I put them everywhere I can.
It's a great idea.
As long as I don't get arrested, I go for it.
Good for you. The arresting part is good if you can avoid that.
Well, it depends on what the cop looks like.
Well, they also say no publicity is bad publicity, but I haven't gone that far yet.
Oh, what have you got to lose, right? It's only a short time, get in there, get dirty. So now, speaking of dirty, how do you like to interact with readers, or do you do social media, website? Do you do?
I am on Facebook quite a bit, but I have one of those love-hate relationships with social media, and I'm a very private person, so that's defeating the purpose of social media. If you don't tell about yourself a whole lot, what's the point? So that's always a little bit not entirely successful, I would say. I love to talk to people in person, and I actually go to markets and artisans markets and such and sell the books in person and talk to everybody. I'll talk your ear off about my books. And then there's nothing better than having somebody come back and say, this was just great. It was wonderful. We had a guy, I often share a table with another friend of mine who writes thrillers. And we had a guy come and say, I wanted to support a local author. And so I bought the book, but I wasn't really expecting anything from either of the books. But, they were really good. And I wanted to apologize because I shouldn't have had that attitude. And I said, you and everybody else, Yeah. It's the whole thing about being a prophet in your hometown.
Oh, yeah, I'll tell you. That's the story of my life.
I've heard that's been said.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's certainly been interesting. Now we'll put up all your information, of course, and the book, Augment Nation, and of course our guest is the author of this book, and it's Scott Overton. So thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much, Alan and Dave. I've enjoyed it immensely.
Thanks, Scott.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or shows, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Yeah. Good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.